Hi and welcome everyone to our event Gamecity Impulse Accessibility in Games. I'm Anna from Gamecity Hamburg and your host today. Um, Gamecity Hamburg is a local initiative that supports the local games industry in Hamburg, but we're also doing a lot of online events like this one to share insights and to share knowledge and to connect with other people. So I'm very happy that we can be here and talk more about accessibility in games. The Impulse was started to talk more about diversity topics in the games industry and in the gaming communities. So feel free to talk more about it. And today I will show you a few intros to our Game City events that will come up after this event. So the first one will be, and the only one I will announce today, will be our Game City the Game City meetup in May 24th. That is like an anniversary meeting for our games industry in Hamburg. So if you're in the region and the area and in Germany, I don't know who can make it, but feel free to come. It's a very nice community and very nice games industry in Hamburg, and we want to celebrate that. So feel free to come on that event. But if you're interested in more events like this, you can go to our website and check out the events. We are hosting a few more this year, so feel free to come and join us. And for today, I'm giving a short introduction and welcoming you all. Then I will show you my lovely guests who are here today. And if you have any questions regarding some special topics or things we talked about, feel free to write them in the chat. I have a nice colleague who will write them down for me, and we will ask them to our panel. And we will have a Q&A afterwards, but feel free to chat anytime you have something on your mind, and we will try to get to them. And after a few lovely hours, we will end this event. So thanks all for being here. And now I will introduce the panel. With me today is Dave Evans from Flying Squirrel. Squirrel is a word no German can pronounce, so I'm sorry in advance. Dennis Winkens, he's with us today. He's a streamer as well on WheelyWorld. And Ela is here. She's UX accessibility specialist at Ubisoft Düsseldorf. So thanks you all for joining. Thanks all for being here. And we will dive right into our discussion. So I will ask a few questions first. Let me start. Please, Dave, can you introduce yourself and talk to the audience? Who are you? What did you work on? Why are you here? Maybe give us a short intro who you are.
Yeah, my name's Dave Evans. I'm a game developer from Canada, and my company Falling Squirrel made a game called the Vale Shadow of the Crown, and it's an audio-based game, pretty much an all-audio game, which was made for anybody who likes novel experience, but it was done in collaboration with the blind and low vision community, who obviously wanted to make a game that was accessible for their community, but also were the experts on making an audio game of this type. So it was a great thing to work with, a great community, and we'll hopefully be doing other games like this in the future.
Great, thanks so much. And we will talk about this more later. Maybe Dennis, you can introduce yourself and talk about your experience and show us who you are.
So hi, I'm Dennis. I'm an online editor, but also a weekend streamer and after work gamer. I'm a quadriplegic, so I'm only able to move my head, neck, and my shoulders. So in front of me, you all see my controller, which I have to use to manage everything, control the PC, and of course to game as good as possible as I can. And yeah, I'm very interested and exciting about this talk here. Some other discussion about accessibility. So I'm very looking forward.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. And Ella, you can take the lead and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ella. I work as a UX accessibility specialist at Ubisoft in Düsseldorf. I've been a UX designer before this, and I have a background in computer science and research. And my day-to-day job is to create more accessible solutions at the team that I'm on. And I'm very happy to be here and learn more, and hopefully also maybe inspire more people to go into this field, because it's super exciting and important.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm gonna head right in with a more open question. Maybe Dave, you can tell us what was the motivation to engage more in accessibility in games on a broader perspective? There had to be a motivation to start it. What was your motivation?
Well, the motivation was not accessibility to start with. I wanted to work in. I'd worked in AAA before. I'd worked on narrative heavy games where I felt the narrative side of it was getting siloed into cinematics, and the gameplay seemed to be very separate. So I've always wanted to make a game that brought the narrative was being told through the mechanics of the game, and a heavier narrative. So in doing this, it would be very expensive for me to sort of do this on my own or with a small team, because I'd moved from AAA into indie. So I thought, oh, I'll make an audio game. So I went up to the expense of all the visuals, and uh, I went about 3 months into the project, sort of knowing at the back of my mind that maybe there was an accessibility angle here, and there might be a group of people interested in a game that's only audio. So I reached out to the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, and not surprising, there were people very interested in playing a game like this, which was a medieval combat, like I don't know what it would be this most similar like, but like a pretty much aspiring to be like The Witcher or something like that, a fairly open RPG game with a main character that has a very strong narrative thread throughout the game. And that's where it all sort of started. I made all my friends in the blind community were made through this game. I did not have an experience with the blind community until this. So for me, it was a really nice introduction into a community that's been around, and I was not connected to at all.
Oh, great. Thanks so much. That really sounds like you uh, learned a lot in that process. We can talk about this more later. And Dennis, maybe for you, it's different. What was your motivation to spread awareness, and you also help other gamers who want to do their setup for their game? So what was your motivation to be more engaged in that?
It's very simple, because the controller I have to use a quad stick it's very powerful. It's a very powerful tool. There aren't very much barriers for me to play nearly any game. But that's at the beginning hard to use, to find out which functions all are usable, how to set up profiles for even a mouse and keyboard setup, or if you want to play as a controller or on PC or console. So it took about 2 or 3 months at the beginning till I was into the whole controller setup thing. And so now I have enough background knowledge how to set up everything easily. So I just thought, why not take the knowledge and help other people to get very fast into it. So the main focus can be set on gaming and not how do I set up the controller. So we all want to play games and don't spend much time around anything setting up. So I want to help this way.
Yeah, thanks so much. That sounds really logical. It's we all want to play and don't want to take so much time to set things up. So, Ela, what was your motivation? I have a follow-up question for you because you have like a no, it's not a big title, but it's a long title. What was your motivation to engage more? And maybe you can explain the insights in which areas you are doing your work, so in your magic, maybe to make us understand more what's your position there. But maybe first, why did you want to do this?
All right, so I was a UX designer, or I've been working in UX for 5 years now, and in my very first job, I actually never planned to work in games, to be honest. If I can be a bit personal here, I never thought I would work in games, even though I do love video games a lot. And in my previous company, it was like communication tools and also a lot of back-end tools that were used in big buildings and, for example, also hospitals. So my goal was to, increase the user experience and really develop interfaces that work. And I realized that only on the design side, I couldn't do as much as I wanted to make our entire hardware, like it was hardware devices, accessible. And I tried to advocate for it, and I always ran into walls, but that just motivated me more to learn more about it. And then I landed at Ubisoft in 2020, and my manager has been always super supportive about accessibility topics and let me, develop and dive more into it. And it was kind of like this very great journey of learning and knowing more about it and applying it in my day-to-day as a UX designer. And I feel like since I started learning about it, I feel like I realized how well it lines up, especially in the like context of user experience, because we build things for the user. So our task is to really talk to people and observe, but the issue is that many times this is only done with a big self-bias, like able-bodied people creating solutions for able-bodied people. And I felt like we were missing out on a lot of information. So I started to self-educate and educate also, doing certifications and all that. And that was kind of like my journey, how I got to my role now, which sounds fancy, but to be honest, I think when you work in accessibility or when you have an accessibility job, you're really a lifelong learner and you're really like always in the student position. So I always find I'm always a little bit I'm a little bit self-sarcastic when I call myself a specialist, because I'm honestly just here to learn more. And I also am very active in the games community, so I pay attention to a lot of the trends, and accessibility has been ramping up quite a lot in the past couple of years. So I feel like these two worlds kind of just came together. So that's how I got into my motivation, and to really make games and everything around as accessible as possible.
Yeah,
because everyone should be able to play games.
Yeah, that's why we're here. That's why we want to learn more. And maybe I can add to this, Dave, in your experience, did the topic accessibility change the last years? Because you said you worked at AAA before. Has there been a shift in the last, maybe, I don't know, what is a good thing, 2, 3, 4 years for you as well? Can you see what has changed maybe for you?
Yeah, I think it's been a bit of a slow movement. I think I'm going to speak historically and not so much about my game, only because I think it's more relevant to look at a game like Last of Us Part 2 for the blind community in particular. That was a huge milestone in creating taking a AAA game, really not sacrificing much from what's in the game, and allowing it to be very playable for people who are completely blind, not just people in the low vision community. And then the follow-up games that have come since, there hasn't been a lot in AAA. I'm pretty sure anything Naughty Dog does will hit that mark, I feel. But outside of that, the sort of the pain points for people in certainly the low vision community, I think every game that's come out of, I know Ubisoft because I live very close to the Toronto studio. They have had consultants on in the sort of best practices, I think, are becoming more understood when it comes to low vision, having contrast modes and things like that. So I think there is a definite evolution towards making these best practices, general best practices, with, for me anyway, knowing the blind community, or working with the blind community, and the consultants that are on my team are completely blind, or have experienced total blindness. There is still a big jump, where it's a much bigger step for any team to take to make a game, basically make a game that's a audio. It can be an audio only experience. So to me, that's still a relatively big barrier, but a lot of stuff around it. I've seen huge steps forward in making this, normalizing this as something that you do as part of production. And then one other little follow up is, and what I'm hoping we'll see, is the tools themselves, the editors and things like that, are still not blind developers to work on their own. So it's still very much a partnership. So as a sighted developer, I'm still necessary to this pipeline for the engines we're working in anyway. So that's something that hasn't gone terribly far yet. And I think it's going to be a few more years still. But that's why I think it's important we do things like this. So.
Yeah, that's great insights you have, because you work with the blind community and you have insight what is needed to produce such a game. Maybe Dennis, you can tell us more. How long do you need now to set up? Has it become easier to set up a game to play for you, or is it still a work in trial and error in the last couple of years?
It's definitely getting better and faster, but it's still in nearly every game. And when you first start a game and you go into settings, open the control tab, and first you only see which button is for which action. So first of all, I have to think, so okay, jumping, for example, okay, I just have to do it once. There will be one jump. Everything's fine. I don't have to hold it or anything else. Then when it comes perhaps some kind of shooter, for aiming, as an example, I know I have to hold it. So, but then it comes to the setting part, or the decision part. Is there be an option so I can change it in the game settings and can switch it to toggle automatically? So I have definitely other functions left on my controller to set it up in a different way, to use more functions in other stuff. So I don't even know every action in a game, if it's hold. Are there any combinations after a few hours of gaming? In some situations, you can't accept what you're coming. So it's, yeah, sometimes a surprise when there's a new barrier and you have to recalibrate the profile when there's some combination, for example, needed. You didn't mention in the control settings that they were able to, or you have to able to do them, but yeah, it's often enough to tweak a little bit after some time playing the games, but it's definitely getting better and faster.
So that sounds for me like wow. So I'm opening the game and I'm just doing for me I just want to have it, I don't know, left-handed for my mouse, and that's it. So that sounds, I hope it's getting better for everyone, so that we can go past these things. Maybe we can talk about the potential, the target group of gamers who will want to play games with accessibility features. So we talked about the blind communities. Dennis, you have your experience with your controller. Maybe Ela, you can tell us more about Ubisoft, and are companies and studios aware of the larger player base they can address when they do accessibility features, and maybe there will be better revenues, or is it just something, oh, we have to do this as well? So are the people aware that there will be more players playing their games if they have features in accessibility?
Yeah, so I think Dave touched on it earlier already with especially, I mean, it's named very often, The Last of Us Part 2 really being this industry-changing game with all these options that are not even specifically accessibility options. Like, I think the goal really is to understand accessibility as something. It's normal. Like every human is very individual in what we need and want, and how we support how we play games or use digital products all together. So I believe there's definitely much more awareness now. I do, however, have a little bit of an issue of completely just phrasing it as like something we can sell or something we can use as like good PR. We want to do it because there are players out there who cannot play the game and who should be able to play the game. Because it's I highly believe, and that's why I also love working in games, is that we're not doctors, we're not doing open heart surgery, but we do create a lot of enjoyment and meaning for people who, especially the ones who live in a very, like, a disability always has a very real medical reality, right? So especially for those people to be able to escape and to enjoy something and to feel capable and immersed is extremely important. And that should actually, our motivation should be to actually design for all players because it's the reality, and not because it's like something we want to sell. Like it's like testing with representative data, and not just with able-bodied people, and continuing this cycle of inaccessible products and games.
Yeah, thanks. That's a very valid point, of course, but you see where I got the question from, because for some people it may be a point not being, we want to share this game and want everyone to play, but can I do this? Does this cost a lot? Can I get something out of it? Maybe we will talk about this later. Maybe Dave, you can tell us more about your experience with your game, and with what not the revenues were, but what the what people told about the game and said about the game, and what was your experience with the community, but also with people who were not from the band community. How was the reception on that?
Yeah, reception was really positive across the board. The community, it's funny because the game, in terms of who's playing this, the Vale, it's a relatively small indie game, but there's going to be more sighted players playing the game than people from the blind community. And but what I realized is how novel the experience is for people in the sighted community, and how much better I think the game was because I developed it with the blind community. I think we just made a better game. And I think that's, I mean, thematically, I think it's also just what accessibility is too. You don't know who's going to use these features and who's going to find the experience novel, or being able to turn something on or off, or having options. It's hard to know every single case and what people might be looking for in a game. And I think over the course of making the game and working with the community in particular, I really started seeing. I know there's some purists who want to make a game that's played the same way by everybody, and this is the experience, especially really hardcore, difficult games and stuff. And that's an audience. It's a specific audience. I really like the idea of making a game where you find something important about what you want to do. Let's say it's narrative, and then you try to offer up as many different ways that people can experience that as possible. I think that's become my preference, mainly from not having any particular disability, just preferences where I don't like this part of the game. I find this tedious, so I'm going to adjust it to make it less tedious, or I really am not challenged enough in this other part of the game. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway is learning all these different places and things in a game in terms of difficulty settings, and then obviously accessibility for the blind and low vision community. I really felt like that's probably the thing I learned the most, and the thing I will take into the next games is that there's experiences I didn't know would be novel or exciting for people, and we're going to pull all those forward, like certain audio mechanics, the immersion factor of having binaural audio surrounding you and not being taken out of the experience by indie developer facial effects or something that we just couldn't hit a bar on, or even the best AAA games, you're still taken out of it, the experience from certain visuals, because they're uncanny, or they're not perfect. But just the amount of leverage we got out of working with audio, and then also seeing all these different little pain points that different groups experience, and the big ones that we left on the table, like people in the who are deaf can't play my game, and maybe there was an aspect of the game that had value, even though the first thought, well, this is an audio game. Maybe this is just the limitation of it, but it's like maybe there could have been a way to visualize audio and things, and this is definitely what we're going to do next time around.
Okay.
I rambled on that one, but
No, thank you that you shared your thought process on when developing the game, because obviously you worked with the blind community to do an audio game, and it's great that you think about the next step. That was one of my question next, was are there no, that's the next question. I have so many questions and so little time. Was talking about maybe the biggest pain points. Maybe we start there. Dennis, you already told us a bit about how you access games, and from your perspective, what are barriers that just are there, and it's just a big pain point for you to say, I can't play this game. So maybe we can just talk about these points, and from your experience as well, Dave and Ella, what you see. But maybe Dennis, you can share your experience. So what's just annoying?
Annoying. It's getting tougher when there are even many inputs you have to do in such a short time. Like some actions, like button smashing in some games, or even just fast played games. It's obviously getting complicated to do all the inputs, but sometimes the games are getting very, very, very tough when it's have some kind of twin stick shooters, because I'm not able to use two joysticks. I just have one here to control with my mouse. And this one does work very well, but there is any opportunity to move a second one. So I was very lucky in Hogwarts Legacy that there was one the lock. What was it? To unlock the doors. You had to use those sticks, but this mechanic was so simple enough. I could work around with a quad stick. It was definitely nice, but when there's anything, you definitely have to use two joysticks. I'm out. So there's no possibility for me. But anything else, yes, it's playable, but you're faster. It's go. If you have more inputs, faster combinations, etc. Or even the setup changes in different situations. So buttons getting other functions in different moments. Then it's getting tough too. So I have to remember which buttons have all kinds of buttons have functions in which mode and situations, etc. So yeah.
Okay, thanks for guiding us through that. And Ella, where do you come in from your perspective? What do you see as pain points? What were things you addressed first when you started with your new or with the shift in your position?
Yeah, so I would love, yeah, exactly. I want to take this question on from like the standpoint of my role because I am neurodivergent, but I am a very able-bodied person, so I do not want to speak for the community with the pain points. But for example, when you are taking on an accessibility role in a project that is already pre-existing, I feel like every new role, there's a lot of finding yourself and like setting up your processes and really setting up your vision. You're doing a lot of like self-management because often there's just there's just things where you come in with your knowledge that others that you cannot delegate yet. So really like being resourceful and making it a shared responsibility. And for me, it's very, very important that, especially when you're working in a big team, you want to really teach people and take away that prejudice against accessibility, because I feel like there is a lot, and I think you touched on it earlier, with costs and like work. That is often what people hear when they hear accessibility, but I do want to actively and proactively remove this bias, because at the end of the day, accessibility is a lot of small design decisions that you make that add up to something bigger. And of course, we're all in our roles, and we can't like tell the other person, oh, you have to do it like this. And also, there's a lot of testing that has to be done. So of course, that is also a process, but really removing this bias from being complicated and costly and hard to do and maybe even optional to do, to really something that's just second nature. Like it's just an awareness and a mindset that you carry with you as a designer or a developer.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. That's really great insight and maybe advice too, to talk about that more. Maybe we can talk about a little bit more about genres. We talked about it earlier. Is any genre, can any game be made more accessible? Maybe that's a question I can offer to you. Dave, you talked about it too, about your experience. Do you, Ella, you said too, it should be able to do anything, but is there some limitations on some things, or do you just say no? Why are you asking this question? Dave, what do you say?
Yeah, I'd love to get Ella's thoughts on this too. But my thoughts are very much around a game and a genre that I think was going to be relatively easy. Anytime you're making a game that has a lot of story and opportunity for soundscapes, and I was always going to fully voice the game. I wasn't going to rely on text to speech or anything like that. So I really wanted to make a game that was, even though it was on indie budget, we put all the work and money and effort into fully voicing it, which would make it a better game regardless of its accessibility. And it really carries the emotion and the sort of I guess the what's the word? The immersion of the scenes is really much set up by these actors. So that was something I was always going to do. But now I have a game that the biggest, most expensive thing I put into it was also the thing that both communities, sighted and blind communities, would get something out of. So I think there probably are some genres that they're very difficult to, and I'm specifically speak to the people who have who are fully blind. It's going to be much more difficult, and there also might not be as much interest from the community too. I really wanted to go to a place where this is what they're asking for, this is what they're looking to play. And I think where we want to be personally is that it would be every game has some analog or some best practice that we can make it accessible, really, because I think, and Ella touched upon this, the idea of everybody should be able to play games. But part of the importance I see, and why I think AAA is probably the most important space, is because it's shared culture. So if it's not just, do I like this game? It's that I have even have the opportunity to play it, so I could talk to my friends about maybe hating the game or whatever it is you want to come to the game for. So just being part of that culture, I think, is important. So if there is a way for them to understand the game, experience the game, and even looking at things that make the game potentially quite different as an experience, I think that for now might be the compromise. The Vale, again, I felt was relatively straightforward because it was going to be an equitable game. It had no visuals, so it was going to play the same for somebody who's sighted and blind. And that's sort of the next step for me, is trying to figure out how to bring all sorts of different control schemes and ways of experience a game, ways of getting input out of a game, whether it's sound, haptic feedback, and having all of those present, and then having a alternative for every single one of those things. So what happens when the lights go out in a scene? What is in its place? What happens when someone sets a certain mode on? So the idea is the game would be drawing on all these different senses, and then we would have analogous mechanics for those senses. And again, I think that will be relatively, and I don't want to say expensive, but depending on the game you're making, that's going to be a lot of design thought and new design thought. And what I'm hoping we'll get is that we'll have done so much of this thinking in sort of handling all these cases. Like I can look at 20 games that handles visualization of sound. It's been done by all these other companies, and I don't have to think too much. But there's still holes that we're trying to fill. And I think as soon as we have all the mechanics together, I think I'm hoping it will just become a best practice that nearly any game or any genre can do this. And yeah, there will be some that might be tricky, but I feel like there's going to be a time when as soon as the tools become more accessible as well, somebody who's in the blind community could, if they care to make that game playable, will have access to doing it themselves as well. And so we'll hopefully cover as many bases as possible. I don't know. It's probably a kind of a wishy-washy answer, but
no, thanks. You I think you explained the point very well. And Ella, maybe you can add to that. You already talked about it and said yes, it's possible, but maybe you can elaborate a bit more about why and how any game can be made, or maybe we can talk about the starting point from your perspective.
Like, I would love to add to the perspective of the game as a medium, and we often talk about, like, there's a lot of gatekeeping happening, I think, in the community when people, like, I feel like that is something that is coming up over and over again, is, for example, these like easy modes and stuff like that. And I view that often like highly skeptically, because it's not about making a game different for your audience. It's about opening it up, like opening up the experience. And of course, that is easier done in some games than in other, or like maybe on a technical level. Like, accessibility happens on many different layers, and one is certainly like a technical layer. The other layer is certainly like a creative vision that people have for their games. And I think these accessibility approaches have to come from both sides. But what I do also want to say is that as game developers, we are masters in creating experiences for people that they find in pleasant. And if you ask someone if they have like a favorite game, and you're like, oh, me too, I love this game as well, they could talk about two completely different aspects that they love. So I think games are the perfect medium to actually open up, because they can be experienced in so many different ways. And if it comes to accessibility and to really opening up this experience, I think it's often just like to realize that this is not taking away, it's actually adding. It's like adding another layer to the experience. So I would love this prejudice to change as well. And yeah, of course, I do think that especially AAA studios have this responsibility of really driving this endeavor and the standards and the research. And I think that's also what I really love about accessibility, because everything is shared very openly. Like there's guidelines, there's articles, there's just openly accessible materials for everyone. And it feels like this, we're all in this together. It doesn't matter which studio we're working at. And I think that's great.
Great. So I think we are all in line there. So we want to have this open community and talk about it more, and talk about everybody wants to play. Dennis, in your experience, are there some kind of games you say now I can access them and before I couldn't? We talked about this earlier a bit, and do you see improvement there too?
Yes, before I had the quad stick, I got it in 2015, I think. And my accident was about 10 years before. So in this 10 years, I was only able to play games which are, yes, on PC visible with just a cursor control and a left and right mouse click. So as you can imagine, there aren't as many titles as you probably want to play. There are very, very good point and click adventures out there, definitely. But after 10 years, you have played them all, not only once or twice. Or Minesweeper, Solitaire, some standard stuff, from operating systems. And now with my hardware, which I can use, yes, it's opening doors to the gaming world. Yes, as the only genre I can't play, and yes, I can't very good play are the twin stick shooters, but anything else is now possible, and so it was a very big social feature too, to can do even more in my free time, because in my environment here, the neighborhood, it's unfortunately not very accessible. So I'm very often at home. So now I can use this time to play, to have contacts with friends about gaming, with gaming, in games, talk over gaming, and so on. So it was kind of a big deal with this controller to open up the whole gaming world again. So, but I would have. I don't know if it's a small question or a bigger one, but to the programming side of gaming or accessible gaming.
Yes, we can jump ahead in. We're already far in the discussion, so go ahead, please.
So I'm no programmer or designer or anything, but is there any possibility yet when a studio programmed some accessible stuff, for example, for controlling, can it be done or can it be used from other studios, for example, or anything for anyone else, to use it as a module in an engine like Unreal Engine or something else? So that's not only or not everyone have to research and program everything on its own. So that would be a very, very big community and collectible from everyone. So Dave have so much experience now with the blind community, so he's a specialist on this. Ubisoft does a lot of research too, and have done big titles with a lot of accessibility features too. So there are a lot of features there. but I don't know if it's possible to share them to other studios, for example, or especially for smaller studios which don't have the money or time, the capability to use or to have such a big research to get their games accessible enough. They want to do them.
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. That's a really great question. So, Dave, do you want to start? Do
I'll
you
just
have
say
any?
something. I feel like
Do
Ella
you have a tip,
has
or do you have a
yeah,
yeah.
anecdotally,
Oh no.
when we develop in general, we're always looking at what are the best practices, what are other companies doing. We don't want to redo work that someone else is doing, and our only limitation is usually the engine we're working in. So we're immediately online trying to find out how other people are doing it, what they're doing. And I've never heard of people being terribly protective of this kind of technology. So it's very widely shared, and people would encourage it for sure. It's really about us not wanting to not redo work in a different way, but also trying to get a sense of if things are conventionalizing in a way like, oh, this is the way you would now expect this mechanic to work. We probably shouldn't reinvent it and change it if it's accepted as being good. So that's sort of the big decisions for us, is we're always looking at other people's work and looking to do it, not because we're trying to steal it, but because we really want to not have to reteach people, teach people something new, especially when it comes to accessibility. And I imagine, sorry, I'm going to throw this to Ella, because I imagine this might be a big part of what you guys talk about, I feel.
Yeah, is there some sharing or open source or something that you use at Ubisoft or that others can use too, or is this maybe from your experience possible? It was one of my questions later to ask about where can I'm doing an indie game. I want to have more insights. Are there best practice examples I can look at? There was a question from the chat as well, how you organize best practices for your work. How do you do your research maybe too? So maybe you can share some insights there. Thanks so much. Thanks so much.
For sure. There's a lot of different points in this question. So I'm gonna start with, where do you start looking? I'm someone who very much learned this all out of a self-initiative. So I have been extremely grateful for a lot of studios and a lot of review websites and also content creators to openly share their knowledge and their reviews and their insights. So that is like something that I cannot emphasize enough, how important this is to understand the topic overall. So this is not like specific to a company. This is just general. If you work in games, or if you even just work in software or as a designer on anything, there's a lot. I can highly recommend Xbox has open accessibility games guidelines. There is a lot to find around web accessibility, especially, which translates not one-to-one into everything, but it gives you a good understanding of what kind of topics you have to cover. I love the website Can I Play That?, where the community of players with disabilities is doing game reviews for games in that aspect of accessibility. So that's super, super helpful to get started on your self-education. We also share, we have news and spotlights for upcoming releases to talk about the accessibility features. I know we work with content creators as well to do accessibility reviews and all that. So I think that's very open and very easy to find. I'm always happy if someone ever shoots me an email. I'm always happy to like give you my whole list of bookmarks, because it's just too many great and smart people out there really sharing their work. And it is it's like the way how you get into this. I think the other part is as well, touching as well on Dennis's question of like, especially programming. I mean, there's definitely two different aspects. Of course, companies have to, I'm not a programmer, so I'm just speaking from what I know, but sharing like game internal code is probably not a thing, but I know there's a lot of endeavors in open engines to make it easier to put accessibility into games for indie studios as well. And did I touch on everything? Oh yeah, and the other thing is like really that part of like design features, like and technically realized features, like really talking about it. I think that's pretty openly shared, so no one has to reinvent the wheel. But I do also believe there's a lot of gaps still, because every game is very, like, you're making a game and that is very contextual. So a lot of decisions that you make are gonna have to fit into a lot of different variables that are never the same for every game. So I highly recommend, looking around, reading reviews, and trying to understand this particular human perception.
Oh, thanks so much. I think you nailed all
Okay.
topics. Sorry for
Okay.
sorry for asking 3 questions in 1 question. You did very well. Thanks so much. I think Dennis, a few points were said. Maybe I can ask you then. Ella mentioned the site. Can I play this? Is there are some examples where you look for, can I play this game, or can I use this game, or can I set up the game to play? Do you have any recommendations for people who want to play accessible games and want to know, can I play this or not? Do you have some sites where you look?
Of course, Can I Play That is a very good site. And it's getting bigger and bigger. It's very cool. There are some smaller sites out there. Also in German or international. Some private what's it called? Some private collections, which people just tried and shared their experience. For me, especially when I think about it, what kind of game it is, and then I would say about 99%, I can check it for myself, if it's possible or not, or if it would be very hard to set everything up, so that I can play that game as good as I want to. But yeah, only 99%. That's still a little surprise what can come up. But yeah, but when I don't know a game very well, or it doesn't give me a hint of how it would be playable, I'm searching for videos from other content creators, some gameplay, just stuff where you can see how the gameplay is, how it's going on, which functions is used, and so on. So I'm looking very around. So sometimes can I play that to get additional informations, but especially gameplay videos or reviews from some bloggers. That's my main part to get info from.
Yeah, thanks so much. That, I think they're great tips and insights to find out. Maybe we talked about it. We dived a little bit into game development, and Dave, you already told us how you approached the accessibility. It may be different for a lot of different companies, but on which point do you start with seeing the accessibility? Where do you need to say, Ella, sorry, on which point in the development process do you need to talk about your accessibility specialist, or you need to have some advisors or need some help from outside? So where's the point that you start with this journey if you want to do a more accessible features, Dave? Can you share some more light on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously our story had it from the beginning because the game had no visuals. But the game also wasn't ever made accessible for the deaf community. So there was a huge spot that we were not thinking holistically about accessibility. I think Ella will certainly feel this way. I'll leave it to her, but the earlier the better. Designing from the ground up is part of a best practice. All these things. Every conference I've been to talks about that. But for me in particular, because the editors are not accessible yet to the consultants I work with or the developers I work with, there's also, just from us personally, our mentality very much is about bringing the people that I work with from the blind community, as they're coming on the project as developers, as game designers, not as consultants. And so that's until we have accessibility in the engines across the board for and again, I'm specifically talking about blind accessibility. I think it's important for me anyway to bring more people from the community into the studios and have them doing some work that is accessible. We have a pipeline that allows one of my partners, Lukas Hosnadel, to be playing the game very early on. And so he's giving me feedback, and the feedback he's giving isn't necessarily about accessibility. It's about all sorts of gameplay aspects. And we're learning where we can make the game more accessible, and in particular, design for accessibility without it necessarily being an added on feature. Like, what are the best practices of just navigating a space? What could make sound? What doesn't have to make sound? How can we avoid using radar all the time? These are the things we talk about, and it very much becomes part of the building the game from the ground up. And then now, because we're making a game with visuals, I'm also consultant, bringing in other people, hopefully in positions that aren't just about coming in at the end or at a certain point to talk about accessibility, but finding places for them to develop the game with us and be just present in every meet. I don't know where their input will be important, but just including them as general designers from the beginning I think that's what's been important for us anyway. And I'd really love to know what Ubisoft does in general. I know they have a lot of consultation. I know that. I don't know how many staff people they bring in to regularly be working on features and things like that. That's kind of, I guess, a mystery to me. So
yes, please enlighten us.
Well, we do have a global accessibility team that is working in collaboration with all of our game teams. So we have like a dedicated team to do that, but it is a shared responsibility, and it is our goal to really like put that as a DNA into our teams. Of course, that is like education and awareness most of the time. And that's also what we're trying, or what I'm trying to very actively do with everyone I'm working with, is really to try and make sure that accessibility doesn't like stay this buzzword, but really becomes like a tangible goal of action points. So I think that's very important. When it comes to the process, I have to obviously heavily agree. The earlier you involve accessibility and people with disabilities into your product or your game, the better. And I think that's something, again, that UX shares a lot with accessibility. I mean, there's for me, UX is accessibility, but just treating it separately here for the general understanding. But I don't come from a visual design background. I come from computer science, and I have been coming to the understanding that most of the time UX is seen as a visual discipline, for example. And I don't fully agree with that because for me it's data science actually, and it's like a role of observation and learning and like tying everything together. And I often see things out in the field where a lot of things are looking very nice, but they're not necessarily the most functional. And I think that also goes for accessibility, that it doesn't really, like if you involve it late, you cannot like reach those deeper layers unless you redo the whole thing. It's kind of like building a skyscraper and forgetting the elevator and having to tear all the levels apart again, basically. It's very important to have this awareness from the beginning. And yeah, that's why it's so important to keep talking about it, even if it's just, even if you can't solve your problem today, it's talking about it with others, and at some point there's going to be a solution for it. So bringing it up is very, very important.
Yeah, thanks so much for the insights. One of my questions was as well, do you all answered kind of a bit. So does a company need a team or an accessibility specialist, or like Dave said, just involve people? There are game developers in the blind community or other communities as well who can do the game and from their experience. So what is your tip? Maybe you can start with a tip, because not everybody will have a diverse studio and will start with one person or two persons. So what is your tip for people who want to start the journey? Maybe Dave, you can share your experience, like a helpful tip for people who may not have consulted anyone so far, or may not have contact with anyone. So what would be a tip for them from your point of view?
I guess from both sides of this, I can just tell you how I met the people I work with now. There's a forum called audiogames.net. There's a very active forum within the blind community, and that was one of the places, aside from other organizations in Canada, that I just threw out this idea of making this game, who would be interested. And there was just a very active group of people there. And I think that's through people becoming involved in the development of this game, bringing their own opinions to the table. That's how I met my first consultant. I actually reached out specifically to the CNIB in Canada, and he came on as someone who actively played games, and he was more specifically a consultant, and he didn't have a game development background, but played games. But very quickly, there's about 300 people that ended up testing the game through audiogames.net, and some of them were very active in participating or in giving feedback and things like that. And one gentleman, Lucas, reached out and said, "Hey, very specifically, I'd like to be more involved in this." And I hired him eventually because he was so good. He was just a fantastic designer in the things he thought about, and really irrespective of accessibility. It was about just the things he thought about and were listening for. So he just proved how sort of essential he would be for the last year of development. And now he's my partner going forward on any game where I'm going to be featuring accessibility, but also the audio mechanics that are hopefully will be novel for anybody playing the game. So that's Lucas's story. So it was just showing interest, and I think that's, especially in indie games, just having people who are actively interested in what you're doing or align with you in some way, finding those relationships. I never really worked in a world where I'm hiring people like through resumes or anything. It's usually relationships I built because of shared interests. So it's just being active and caring and giving your opinions about stuff. And we want it from a developer standpoint. We are completely beholden to people's opinions about games, hopefully thoughtful and not mean, but that's how we design and develop games, because we don't know how people are going to come to them, how they're going to play them. So it's the activity. And by the way, I think we're making a twin stick shooter next, so I probably want to talk to Dennis about what not to do. There's an element of twin stick shooting, but there's also, you don't have to. But I'm like, oh geez, I better get this right. But this is how this happens.
Dennis is saying yes.
Yes, I will have a look at it if I can.
Yeah.
Would be
Yeah.
very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip to just reach out. Ella, what's you're saying that like what's your tip? Because do you think you will want to have more people coming in and supporting what you are doing right now at your team? We didn't talk about the how big your team is, how much of control you have in the accessibility designs. So what would be your tip for starting, or your wish maybe for the future there?
Yeah, so there's this joke among accessibility practitioners. It's kind of like this take on our own roles, where we say actually our goal is to make our own role obsolete. So we want to basically put ourselves out of our own job in a way, because you're saying it quite right. You don't have all the control, and you shouldn't, because it's impossible. And that's why if you would be the bottleneck for every single design decision, first of all, that is a lot of responsibility, and second of all, that it's very easy to burn out over that. So it cannot be on a single person or two people. I'm gonna say it's probably good to hire when you want to get started into the topic, and really like set up processes, and having someone who is taking on the solution drive, and the conflict resolution and everything, and then where people can go to and know, okay, this person knows or can know this or can gather this knowledge for us. So that is very cool. But I do highly believe it's this big shared responsibility of a team, where again it's so important that people are caring, and they have an open mind, and they really want to learn about this, and eventually it just becomes just a staple in the team. Like it's just a thing, just like everything else in design and development. So it's that is my tip.
Yeah, great. Thanks. I think it's good we're talking about it, that people can start with the open mind to think about it. I think some have come farther than others and have already thought about it. So maybe for starters, it has to start somewhere. So maybe it's not just the big I have to do everything now. Maybe it's a small step first to just think about it and talk about it with people who know about it. So maybe that's the first point. I have a question for Dennis that may be provocative, maybe. Is there something you wished game designers would do when you play a game? Is there something you say that really would help the accessibility? Something you say that would be great.
One idea is, of course, to integrate disabled people with different needs in the very few beginning in developing games, when it comes to tough decisions, probably if it's UX, if it's sound, if it's anything else. Just reach out. There are I can't imagine someone would say no if there's a possibility to test a game, and it, of course, on the one hand, okay, you can test the game, perhaps even if it's still in programming process, but also be part of the process, and probably can do a little bit better in accessibility, so more people have more fun of the game, and the whole game community itself around this game will be bigger. So that's of course two points. I know Ubisoft does things like that with users, so that's definitely a good way. And yeah, when they are hiring, so they also work and on twin stations at the game would be also, of course, very good because they bring their knowledge directly into the code or design wherever they work. When someone is searching such a job, but definitely work and talk with the people and not only try to imagine what could be good for them, just ask, bring them in, and so it only can be better, and in the end, more fun for everyone.
Yeah, yes, I just can say yes to this. Yeah, it's so true. Maybe we can. I'm watching the time. Maybe we can address one more thing about the game development thing, and then we can go over to some chat questions and some more open questions. Dave, you said something about not everything is accessible for game designers from the blind community to be part of the development process. So from your experience, what would have to change more so that people can be part of the development process? What are the barriers, and what is the environment that's still holding them back?
Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to speak to this terribly well. I know this through friends that have tried certain initiatives that have come out of the major third-party engine, like a Unity or a Unreal, and there still seem to be barriers. I know they're working on this. I know I've met people who are actively working on solving this problem, and I think again, very specifically, people who are totally blind, there's a different barrier to entry because there's no visual things that can help in terms of like allowing for larger text and these sorts of features that you could do to allow the game to be easier to navigate, or the game editors to be easier to navigate. They're also very complex pieces of software, and a lot of stuff, especially on the Unreal side, has got to visual based node editing and things that where the layout, the specific layout in a visual space is kind of the user interface for these things. So I can see the challenge for sure, and I do know that there's people working on it, and I do know that my consultants are actively looking into this, so that we might be on a threshold. I don't know this. But there's also, at least in the blind community, there's quite a tradition of doing things with sighted people, not just co-developing a game, but marathon running, cycling, various sports involve very specifically sighted and blind players playing together or partnering. So there's kind of a cultural tradition of this. And to me, that also made it a very accepting place to work for a sighted person to come in. There was no animosity for me being there. And I'd like to think that's pretty true for everybody's experience, or most people's experiences, that it's just an inviting place. So I think it's the partnerships continue until we get things better and better. And my understanding is that there's things being developed, and I wouldn't know the specific linchpin, but as you can imagine, trying to completely make create the ability to navigate a very complex engine would be a pretty daunting task. And actually, I realize Ubisoft doesn't use like Unreal or Unity. They have their own editor, and I'd be interested to know if there's initiatives within Ubisoft, if you can say it, on bringing someone who's totally blind into the company and able to navigate the game on an editor level.
Yeah, what can you enlighten us on that?
Yeah,
Thanks so much, Dave.
Unfortunately, I do not have an insight on our current engine development, but I do know, because this is such a global endeavor, that there's certainly initiatives and teams that are looking into this. I just cannot tell you how much and into what exactly and to which degree. Yeah, but I'm very curious to see that too, actually.
So there is some things are changing, some things are made more accessible, and in some time in the future, there will be better tools for everyone to work with. There was a chat question asking, I want to ask this openly because I'm interested in your opinion about can AI be of support in that kind of things? What is your opinion? Because I have no idea if this can be useful for accessibility topics or not. Do you have an opinion on that, especially for this part, or is this just like, we have no idea? We will see.
I will say very briefly that that this is probably the best thing I can think of, like of all the horrifying possible outcomes for AI. The idea that it could potentially simplify an experience, or as a learning AI, be able to read the intent of the designer or the user. I already see it in my friends who use things like Alexa or Siri or Google, how transformative that's been for their day-to-day lives technologically. I would think it's probably one of the more interesting positive outcomes of developing that further. Yeah, but that's my feeling, I guess. Hopefully.
Yeah. Do you have a say about this, Ella?
Yeah, so of course that is not my role currently, but with my tech background, I'm always like, I did machine learning and stuff in university. It's a long time ago, but obviously, yes, I see a lot out there that is like super interesting. I agree. It's probably one of the better things that we can do with AI to really like support people also in games. But it's also very important to note that our AI is developed from data and has specific processing algorithms. So those also have to be done with accessibility and diversity in mind, especially. There's a lot of bias on this level as well. So it's very important that even if you work in any profession, accessibility and inclusion is always important. So let's hope that the people who make those AIs are also considering that.
Yeah, thank you. That is a valid point. Dennis, have you experience with AI in any sort of setting things up, or is this just like, no, we have to wait until we can use this for anything that's supporting like the quad stick or anything like that? I have no idea how to use AI. If you can see my question.
I don't have much experience with it. I didn't use ChatGPT yet, but I know there's very much possible with it, but I'm technically not fit enough to do any suggest what can be done in which way, or whether it would be more easier. I think there's a big potential, but how to use it, I'm out, unfortunately.
So yeah, that's I'm too. So we will see. Hopefully, it will be something that supports and helps, and maybe just not something that is driving us insane. But that's my take on that. So thanks all for being here. We only have a short few minutes, so I want to ask you more personally. What do you think about the future? Will there be more games with accessibility? What is your wish? What do you wish, Ella? Maybe you can talk us. You can now speak freely. What is your? We talked so much about so many interesting things. How we can approach this? What can help? What's your experience? So, what is your wish for the future? What do you think will happen or want to happen?
Well, ideally, of course, in a perfect world, I do hope that accessibility will keep on building momentum and keep on pioneering many different disciplines, including user experience and having a more inclusive approach to our crafts. I think that is super important. Something that I also really hope is that even when people don't work in development or design roles, like if people work in management or like have a lot of responsibility, that they do understand the gravity and the importance of this topic. That would be very good. It's always good to have support on every level for this. Something I wish for the community is also to understand that gatekeeping is not a way forward. It's not taking away from an experience. I think adding accessibility options is evidently really, really beneficial for everyone. And even like, you know, things like key remappings or subtitles, like these very like basic features came from an accessibility need, and now it's like super normal. Like I have subtitles on because it's so much better for me to understand what's going on. And one last thing that I really wish is also that, especially here in Germany, I feel like there's still a lot of missing nuances when it comes to laws for people with accessibility, with disabilities, sorry, because I think they should change in favor. It's still really hard sometimes to create a dialogue and to really like officially test with people and like pay them, of course, for their work, because we don't want to risk their welfare and all that. So I think it's very evident that a lot of laws are not nuanced enough and come from people who actually don't have a disability. So I hope that there's a lot of positive change in that regard as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I can totally understand what you're saying. So Dennis, what do you wish for, especially it's now for the gaming parts and for the future of games with more accessibility settings? What do you dream about this in the future?
A dream would be, of course, that more games will have a lot of accessibility features for everyone. So everyone who wants to play a game, who sees a game, heard of it, and just thinks, "Hey, it's interesting. Sounds very nice. I heard about it. I want to play it," and don't have to think about it. Can I play it? I have to have a special setup or anything else. Even just thinking, "Hey, is it cool for me? Will I have fun? Is it kind of topic I like or not?" And if yes, just get it and don't have much trouble to get into it, and just have to you just have to play it. And of course, if it's technical possible, let's I would say it's more kind a little bit more into topic with the engine the developers are working when the ground technique and program the engine is so designed and so powerful with stuff that it's easily to implement all accessibility features you want to bring it in. So there isn't much effort needed for the developers and programmers. So they can program as they like and don't have to break everything down on their own.
Yeah, thanks. I think that sounds great. Like the skyscraper Ella mentioned, like yes, we have to have a great foundation to work with for everyone. And so Dave, what do you think? Do you have anything to add? Your wishes, your dreams?
Yeah, I'm ultimately echoing what's being said. The idea of the sort of the normalization of what is accessibility, that it just becomes good design and good UX is just the way we look at it. No one specifically has to worry about or think about accessibility because it is so ingrained in good UX and good design. And then there's people from the various communities involved in the process that don't even have to be there specifically for better accessibility, just better UX design, gameplay, all those things. So those are the sort of three things I think are going to naturally happen, I hope. And then maybe the big one that's specific to me is just because there's still that golf, and I've said it so many times. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it again from the blind community in particular. Yeah, there is quite a bit of effort that I think needs to be made to make more popularly shared pieces of media, and in particular games, accessible to the people who are totally blind. And that's to me the biggest barrier out there still. And it's the one that I'm sort of in line with working to sort of figure out what the best practices are, looking at games, stuff that Ubisoft is doing and stuff that in particular Naughty Dog they've done in Last of Us Part 2. And I think what's kind of exciting about that is the fact that it's still coming together. Like, it's not conventionalized yet. So I think this will be a hopefully exciting 5 years, 10 years maybe, of finding really cool new ways to incorporate sound in games to make it more accessible. And then everybody will see how cool that kind of is to also have sound doing a lot more of the storytelling or the navigation and those sorts of things. So you can have all these senses kind of being used in gameplay as a base for anybody who wants to gravitate towards a visual based experience, a sound based experience, an experience that requires less button inputs or button mashing, stuff like that. I think it's happening, and I can't wait till that. There's either everybody in your company kind of knows those best practices, or it becomes such industry standard that you just do them and you know them.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think we covered a lot of topics and gave everyone a lot to think about, and us as well. So thank you, Dave and Ella and Dennis, for joining us and for talking about your experience. And thanks for the audience. We may not have passed down every question, so feel free to join our Gamecity Discord if you want to hang out. It's a great community with developers from Hamburg, Germany, and beyond. So check it out if you have more questions. So please feel free to check out our Discord and our website if you want to know more about the events. You can check out The Vale by Falling Squirrel if you are now curious about the game. We talked about it, so don't be shy and ask about it. Look at Ubisoft, what they're doing. Take the hints from Ella and look at all the tips she gave you to do research and find out more about it. And Dennis does a whole lot of things at WheelyWorld, and he also has some great tips for you if you are asking. So feel free to contact and come together. So thanks all for joining us for this really great talk, and I hope we see each other soon. So yeah, and I hope we can talk about this more and more. It's really an important topic, and this was just the beginning for many of us. So just keep on talking some more. So we will close the evening now. I will stop talking in a few seconds. Thank you all for joining, and have a great night. And thanks for being part of this.
Thank you.
Thanks.